For this week's Parsha, there's a big ethical dilemma that the Ramban tackles. To start, just because the Ramban doesn't go into the the nitty-gritty of the issue in particular. That issue itself comes out more clearly in the works of the Rabbi and Maimonides. This is one of those rare instances, by the way, where the Rambam and the Ramban actually agree with each other on something. So I'm just going to quote the Rambam in Mishnah Torah. He's the first source. This is Hilchos Tshuva, the laws of repentance. So the Rambam's talking about a certain idea, which is we would think it's atypical to talk about when you're talking about halachos. And Tshuva itself is an interesting topic to address from like a halachic perspective of what you have to do, what it's all about. But within Hilchos Tshuva, the Rambam goes on a long discussion about bechira chafshis, about a person's free will. And why is that something that we can imagine is essential when we're talking about Tshuva? Any thoughts?
You have to Tshuva, it has to be good, so you have to have a free will
to mean it has to come from a person's own free choice. So that's certainly one aspect of it.
Wouldn't be sincere.
It wouldn't be sincere with that bechira chafshis to do tshuva. So the Rambam, he takes in a little bit of a different direction. All those answers are certainly true, but he says something which gets to the core of things. So this is in Hilchos Tshuva in Perek Hey. So the Ramban says v'davar zeh, and this matter, this principle, he's talking about bechira. Before this, he's talking about the concept at length. He says, Iker Godol, this is a very important principle. Amud HaTorah v'HaMitzvah, it is a pillar upon which all of the Torah and the Mitzvah stand upon. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, this is a pasuk from Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu talking to Klal Yisrael, Re'eno sasi lefanecha hayom es hachayim, ... So the pasuk continues, Moshe is saying, I'm giving before you, I'm giving this day life. Also, the pasuk continues, the Rambam doesn't quote the rest of it, es hatov, and I'm also giving you good. Es hamavis v'esara, I'm also giving you the possibility of death and evil. And then Uchsiv, another pasuk in Devarim as well. Behold, I give you before you on this day, and the pasuk continues, Brachu Klala, I give you the option of blessing or curse. Kilomar. That is to say, the Rambam's using these psukim to demonstrate Sheharashus biyadchem, that the options are in their hands, they have choice. And anything a person chooses to do, he can choose whether to do the good or the bad. Right? God is speaking, this is Moshe's recap of what happened at Har Sinai. The Jewish people are saying, Moshe Rabbeinu, the rest of God's messages, maybe you'll be the intermediary for us, because we can't handle hearing God's voice directly. And Moshe is a little bit upset about that. But Hashem tells Moshe that no, they're coming from a good place, and Hashem says, if only that this was in their hearts always, if only, it's not a given. Hashem is saying, if only that they were making the right choices and approaching me from a yira, an awe-based perspective all the time. When God says, if only this was the case, He's God, why doesn't He just make it happen? Right? Because God allows a person, He never forces a person to do one thing or the other. He doesn't force a person to do either good or bad. Everything is given to a person with regards to their free choice. They have bechira chafshis. And the Rambam continues. Let's say God had actually decreed that a person would either be a tzaddik or a rasha in their lifetime. It's determined already. Or let's say Hashem placed upon in a person's path in his life something that will define, which will draw him his essential nature. One way or the other, one way of thinking over the others, or perhaps one attribute over another, forcing a person to do one action over another. Let's say all of this was forced. Has in fact, astrologers, the foolish astrologers, actually think that everything's predetermined. Haven't could we possibly understand the concept of a commandment, of the Nevi'im telling us, do this, don't do that? And the Nevi'im say, improve your ways, don't go in the ways of evil. But how could you respond to such a command if everything was already predetermined? It's decreed upon you. Or let's say a person's nature, it causes him to be drawn after one way that he can't move away from. What's the point of being warned one thing over the other? What would be the purpose of the entire Torah? Ube'ezeh din ve'ezeh mishpat nifra min harasha. And what would be how would the concept of justice in any way towards Rishayim or reward to tzaddikim, to righteous people, how would that make any sense? Paraphrasing Avraham Avinu, Hashofet kol haaretz lo ya'aseh mishpat. Can the judge of all the land not do proper judgment? The Rambam is saying, in addition to a person's free will being essential to perhaps a sense of sincerity in their tshuva, another reason why it's a very important concept is tshuva is meant to be a process by which I correct a wrong I've done. The concept of wrong, of being wrong, it assumes a certain level of responsibility. And that responsibility itself is dependent on the concept of bechira, of free will. If I was to force somebody to do one action and then get angry at them for doing it, so that can't be their fault. Right? The ability to punish somebody is dependent on the fact that they had the choice to do this, or did not do it, and they chose to do it. Right? If a person is an ones, a person is in a situation with regards to our mitzvahs, this happens sometimes often, that a person is faced with a situation where they can't do a given mitzvah. We don't assume that Hashem's going to punish them for that reason, provided that it's not because of their own negligence, their own free choice. If it's something that just came upon them, we don't take them to task for it. The Rambam says, though, in general, when a person does have a choice in the matter, that's when he will, in fact, be considered as having done something wrong, and then tshuva is necessary. So the Rambam says that that's a key concept in all of Jewish thought. The Torah, the concept of laws, that can only exist if we understand this concept of bechira. So, with that in mind, and without looking ahead, can anybody think of a difficulty with this approach? The Rambam himself is going to bring that up, but within this week's Parsha, this coming week's Parsha, Parsha's Ve'era, a little bit in last week's Parsha to come afterwards. So,
hardening of the heart.
Hardening of the heart, right? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, he tells Moshe, even before Moshe goes on his whole mission, I'm going to harden Pharaoh's heart. He's not going to let you go right away. And don't worry, it's all part of the plan. Eventually you will get out. There's going to be Makos. It's going to be a whole story. Now, when Hashem says He's going to do that to Paro, He's essentially saying, it seems, that He's going to be taking away Paro's bechira chafshis. He's going to take away Paro's free choice. That Paro is going to be confronted with, so to speak, the choice of letting the Jewish people go or keeping them around, and Hashem's going to force his hand. He's going to force him to do the wrong thing to keep the Jewish people in Egypt, and then he's going to get punished for it, it seems, with the Makos, with everything that happens to the Egyptian people. So it seems to be a very challenging point to stick in here, to think about the concept of bechira, while at the same time we have psukim, we have stories in Tanakh that are explicit about the fact that Hashem sometimes takes away bechira. So why is that okay?
Well, first of all, the story of Paro is one of the great exceptions in the Torah.
Okay.
This is not, the fact that he takes Paro's free will away is almost a statement about how important free will is. Is that this is, there are not many exceptions in Tanakh.
Why would we say, so if, keeping in mind that this is an exception, and that's the road I think everybody's going to take, because this is the general principle
the
that there is.
The whole Yeshiva Universitys has a great overarching role in the unfolding of world history, Jewish history, world history. And God does many miracles in this process, one of which is removing the free will of Paro, because it is a great exception to it, because he's manipulating the situation.
He certainly seems to be doing so, but if we were to ask why that's the case, why was that fair, first of all, and why was it necessary?
Well, one could argue that it's fair because Paro overstepped the cruelty of his position.
Okay, so we'll get into those answers. Yeah.
If his heart wouldn't have been hardened, he would have never been able to withstand all the makas. So we're giving him like a chance to be able to conquer these struggles.
We'll see. Right. So don't shame.
And therefore, he will have a choice.
The RAMBAN. So he tells us two, which really is going to turn into three approaches. There's a fourth and a fifth approach also that I'd like to get into. So as we go through the sources, but this is the RAMBAN, I think, is the first person to bring this argument into the Chumash itself, and to talk about this. Rashi takes it for granted that of course Paro's choice is taken away, and doesn't seem to be bothered by that at all. The RAMBAN understands how that's going to go against the general principle of our faith, like we said in the Rambam. Everything, all of Torah, concept of right and wrong, and the fact that we humans have a responsibility, it rests on this concept. So when you see an exception, we have to understand how this exception is working. Why is it happening, and what purpose did it serve? So the Ramban he starts by saying Vani Aksha es lev Paro. So this is the first time this comes up. Hashem is promising to Moshe, I'm going to harden Paro's heart. So Amr b'Midrash Rabbah. So the Ramban quotes the Midrashim. He always likes to reference the words of Chazal. He wants to see what they have to say about a matter, if they have an opinion. So Chazal say in SHEMOS Rabbah, Gilu lo shehu asid chazik es libo ba'avor la'asos bo hadin. Hashem is revealing to Moshe right now that in the future he's going to be hardening and strengthening Paro's heart in order to punish Paro. Because Paro enslaved the Jewish people with horrible slavery, hard work. For Odsham, there's another medrash that says, also in SHEMOS Rabbah, Ki ani hikbati es libo. Hashem says, I'm going to harden their hearts. That's later on in Chumash. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Mikan piskon peh leminin. This provides a pretext, almost an excuse for apikosim, for people that don't believe in the essentials of our faith. They'll have an excuse to say what they say. Lomer lo haisa mimenu sheyaset teshuva. They'll say, look, God, He didn't give Paro the opportunity to do teshuva. So this is a problem. Rabbi Yochanan says. I'm Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Shimon ben Lakish says, Yistam piyam shalminin. Now close the mouths of those heretics. Ela im leitzim hu yalit. Quotes pasuk from Mishlei. Those people that are filled with scorn, God responds to them in kind. Masrabo pam rishono ushniyo ushlishis. If a person warns someone else 1 time, 2 times, 3 times, this person doesn't repent, he doesn't listen to these warnings. God will, in those situations, actually take away that person's ability to do teshuvah in order so that He can actually repay this person for the sins that he did. Right? Kach Paro harasha. Same thing by Paro. Since God sent to Paro 5 different warnings, and Paro never listened. If you look at the psukim themselves, not every time you have a heavying of the heart in the psukim does it say that God is the one doing it. If you look at the wording of the psukim, in the first 5 makos, in fact, and also in the 7th, it says that Paro hardened his own heart. This is not God doing it. The other makos are where it says that God in fact hardens it. That's the one that's more theologically difficult. But what you have is Paro hardening his own heart, not needing any help from God, so to speak, and making the wrong choice here. For the first 5 times, and then Omer lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says to him, Ata hakshisa es arpecha v'echbate es libcha. You're stiffening your neck. You're hardening your own heart. Harini mosif lecha tuma atumasacha. I'm going to double your defilement. I will give you more tum. I will force you to make the wrong choices in the future. So that's the perspective of the Midrash. So what do we think is being communicated here? How does this solve the problem in some way? Before we see what the Rambam himself actually references. So for the first 5 times he didn't receive from the Midrashim, but after that, Hashem does say that He will. And if you look in the language of the Psukim, there are some where it says Hashem actually hardened Paro's heart. So how do we understand why those are less difficult in light of what these Midrashim are saying? Any ideas? No? So the Ramban, he's going to spell it out for us. So he's going to take these Midrashim and go with it. Now, what Chazal are addressing when they say these things, they're trying to answer the question that everyone asks. If Hashem is hardening Paro's heart, what exactly was the wrongdoing of Paro? That's not his fault. It's not something he can take responsibility for. There's 2 answers to this, and they're both true. One of them is, Paro, in his own inherent evil qualities, what he did was he did bad by the Jews. He did it for no reason. So it was, so to speak, obligated for Kadosh Baruch Hu to prevent Paro from having the ways of teshuvah. And you have this concept that comes up many times in Tanakh. Concerning Paro's first actions, with regards to actually enslaving the Jewish people, the punishment of those things was not just the makos. In many ways, the punishment was actually taking away his choice, his ability to choose properly. Paro had Bechira to begin with, and when it was perfectly he was within his own mind when he chose to enslave the Jewish people and do bad by them. But because of that, a consequence, in addition to being punished for his bad deeds, he was also punished by not being able to choose properly and to do teshuvah afterwards. And it's a very a person has to go very significantly over the deep end to get to that point, it would seem, right? That God, so to speak, gives up hope on this person. Not that Paro wouldn't have been able to choose appropriately if he had still had Bechira. But at a certain point, God says, you've done so much bad that the way to punish you here is to not give you a chance to do Teshuvah. That's a different concept. We won't get into that. Maybe at another time. But so that's one approach that the Ramban says, and that comes out from the first Midrash. Because Paro enslaved the Jewish people and made such horrible choices to begin with, one of his forms of punishment was Bechira was taken away from him. That in general, people have Bechira. We have free choice. We can make the right decisions, and we're responsible when we don't. But there are situations where a person does so much bad, where their punishment can actually be that that Bechira, that free choice, is taken away from them. So the Ramban continues using the second Midrash now.
Bechira is taken away, also Tshuva is taken away at the same time.
Right, because like we mentioned in the Rambam at the beginning, Tshuva depends on Bechira. A person has to be able to choose and say, I've done something wrong, I understand that I'm responsible, and therefore I'm going to change my ways. A person can't change his ways if his hand's being forced at that point. Right. So the Ramban says the second option is Hatam Hasheni, Ki hayu chatzi hamakos alav bipshao. Half of the makos themselves, but forgetting the enslavement of the Jewish people, half the makos themselves were a result of Paro and his own negligence, his own horrible choices. Kilo nemar behen rak v'yachazek leiv Paro. Right? It says by most of these psukim, they note in parentheses there, they tell you the instances where it happens. It says that Paro hardened his own heart. V'yichbad Paro es libo, and Paro hardened his own heart. Hine lo ratza l'shalkom l'chvod Hashem. He personally chose not to send the Jewish people out for the honor of God. Aval kasher gavru hamakos alav v'nila lisbolosam. However, after enough bad choices on his own, the makos began to take their toll. He was very weary and couldn't handle them anymore. Rach libo. So then Paro's heart started to soften. The punishments were getting to him. And he had chosen at that point on his own personally to send them out because of the harshness of the plagues. He couldn't handle it anymore. Lo lasas ratzon boro. But he didn't do this anymore. He wasn't doing this to do the will of God. And because of that, hiksha Hashem es rucho. God hardened Paro's heart. Va'amitz es levavo. He strengthened Paro's heart. Leman siper shemo. In order for his name to be declared, so that God's name would be more well known. Ke'inyan shekasav, like it says in the pasuk, v'skadati v'skadashti v'nodati le'enei goyim rabim. Like God says, I'm going to be giving more makos. This alludes somewhat to a third reason that we're going to get to more. We'll elaborate more on that. I am making myself greater. I am sanctifying myself so that my name should be known among all the nations. That Paro's what the Ramban is saying here is that Paro's Bechira was taken away, not because of his choices in choosing to enslave the Jewish people, but the second approach is because of his choices in continuing to keep them around after experiencing the first 5 makos. At that point, he's actually able to soften his heart because of the punishments that he's receiving. But then what God does is he throws him a curveball. God actually takes away Paro's Bechira, and then he's actually forced to experience the last 5 makos. So those are the two basic approaches of the Ramban. The Rambam also seems to take that approach. If you look in Mishnah Torah, the Rambam himself elaborates on the sources that we built off of from the very beginning, and he basically takes the same ideas. Okay. So the Ramban continues. So we have 2 answers. There is a third one that the Ramban is somewhat alluding to that we'll get to in the next source, a little bit more specifically. Let's just finish this paragraph. Vasher Amar Kodem Hamakos, when it says before the Makos, Vani Achazek es libo v'lo yishlach es ha'am. He's saying, God is saying, I'm going to harden Paro's heart. He's not going to send out the Jewish people. Yodia l'Moshe ha'asid la'asos bo hamakos ha'acharonos. He's making it known to Moshe in the future. Right? This is happening before the Makos, the whole Yetzias Mitzrayim story happens, in order to make Moshe aware of what's going to be taking place. Ke'inyan sha'amar, like it says in the pasuk, V'ani odati ki lo yitin eschem melech Mitzrayim l'halo. I know the king of Egypt, this is before anything else happens, I know the king of Egypt's not going to let you guys go. V'zeh tam v'ani akshes le'paro, and that's the reason why I'm hardening Paro's heart. V'rebesi esosasai, I'm going to increase my miracles. Kolomar sha'akshe libo l'man rabos motsai ba'aretz n'sai. I'm going to harden Paro's heart in order so that I can increase the miracles that are happening in Egypt. Ki b'chamish makos achronos gam hativiyis gam etviyas hayam nemar ve'achazek Hashem. Because if you look at the last 5 makos, as well as the Kriyas Yamsuf experience also, it says Hashem hardened Paro's heart. And this last pasuk is most interesting. This is in Mishlei. Shlomo Melech says, Ki leiv melech biyad Hashem. The heart of a king is in the hands of God. El kol asher yachpot yitenu. And anything that God wants, He's going to turn a leader into that direction. This is a little bit of another idea as well, that Bechira might not actually, to what extent you take this at pasuk and Mishlei, but it seems to be saying that with regards to a king, with regards to a leader of a large group of people, that they have no Bechira. God is guiding them entirely. You can't be angry at your prime minister. You can't be angry at your president. It's not his fault. God's moving this person whichever way He desires. But there's a little bit of a third approach that the RAMBAN is alluding to slightly here, which he says much more specifically at the beginning of Parsha SHEMOS. If you look in Parsha SHEMOS, so this answers the question with regards to Paro, right? Everything that we've said until now. Paro made his own bad choices, and because of that, Hashem is taking away his choice. He's stooped that low. But who else is suffering? Who else is being punished throughout this whole episode? Sorry? That's before the Makos. But let's talk about during the situation where Paro's heart's being hardened and the Makos are taking place, and we assume that the Jewish people weren't experiencing the effects of the Makos. Right. So who else is suffering besides Paro?
The Egyptians.
The Egyptians, right? So everything we've said is very nice with regards to Paro's own choices. How do you make sense of the fact that the Egyptians are suffering? So in next week's Parsha, in Parshas Bo, at the very beginning, Hashem says again, He's hardening Paro's heart, but He says something a little bit more interestingly. He says, Ki ani ichbati es libo, I'm going to harden Paro's heart, and the Dibra Maskal of the Ramban doesn't continue, but the rest of that pasuk is, Ve'es leiv avadav, I'm also going to harden the heart of His servants. We start actually seeing a hardening of the heart of the Mitzrim as well, who, although we know that the Egyptians, as we read last week, they did plenty of evil on their own. Can't imagine that everyone did. Can't imagine that everybody is deserving perhaps of the punishments that all of the 10 Makos, brought to them. So how do we understand the hardening of the Egyptian people's hearts? How do we understand that? So the Ramban says another reason that he alluded to previously, but this also addresses this point. Hodia HaKadosh Baruch Hu LaMoshe shehu hichbir es libam ata achrei shepachdu mimenu bebarva v'hisvadu alavona. God is making known to Moshe that He's hardening the hearts of the people, despite the fact because they were afraid after as a result of the barad of the hail, and they actually confessed to their sin. If you look in the Psukim, you see that the Mitzrim, they actually were starting to come around. Paro wasn't necessarily, but the Mitzrim, they realized that they had done wrong. So they were coming to a stage of vidui, of confession, of acknowledging their mistakes, of wanting to do tshuva. Yet still, they have another 3 Makos coming to them after barad. So what gives? So Amar lo hatam, God tells Moshe that the reason is ki asisi kain, the reason why I, God, do this, laman she'asisa bekirbam ila ha'usos asher ani chafetz la'asos bahem she'idu mitzrim es kavurasi, that I am causing these things to happen in their midst, and I want this to happen. It's so that I'm doing these miracles so that the Egyptians know my strength. Lo she'anisho sam yoser mipnei hakavod hazeh, I'm not punishing them more than what they deserve because of the things they've done. I'm also telling you this. I'm also causing these miracles to happen so that the Jews should also know the strength of my actions. That they should know that I am God. I can do anything I want, both in the heavens and the earth. So here there's a little bit of a third reason, and here we're going to have to work a little bit more to understand why it's fair. But what's the reason that the Ramban just said? Why is He hardening the hearts of the Mitzrim? So we could take it in the direction that the Ramban said previously, that they made their own bad choices and therefore they're going to suffer from this as well by getting their free choice taken away from them. I think he goes in a little bit of a different direction. Here he's saying that actually these are no longer serving as a punishment, but it's something else.
They were steeped in Egyptian culture and the Avodah Zarah, so it's time for them to know that there's a God in this world.
Mm-hmm. So that could be it could be a result of their misplaced understanding of the world and the way that they live their lives. The one thing for sure is that the Ramban is saying is that this is to make known that there's a God in the world. It's to really establish His presence. And that's why we celebrate Pesach in the way that we do, because it was God's revelation to not just the Jewish people, but to the entire world that He's running the show.
So this could be why there were people from the era of Rav who joined the Bnei Israel.
You can see where they're coming from, right? And that there was an understanding that the world had, that certainly the Egyptians had after this whole thing was done, was that there was a God and the Jewish people were right and their religion is correct. The problem is that, that's a reason for Hashem to harden their hearts so that they don't let the Jews go. And therefore there's more makos to do and more ways that Hashem can show His presence and the fact that He's around. But how does that help us understand the fairness concern? How is that fair? they're going through all this suffering just so that they can, be corrected in their way of thinking. That's a little bit more difficult. RAMBAN, he doesn't elaborate why that would be okay. I think something that we have to touch upon is who says that these punishments are actually, I guess, in their net effect, going to be something that's viewed as a suffering. Something that's, certainly the makos themselves were hard to go through, but when we talk about this sometimes, there's kind of a scale that if a person is perhaps going through more suffering than they're deserving, we sometimes view that as a good thing. When a person goes to Olam Haba, so to speak, all the suffering that they went through in this world, that's something that, so to speak, it gets rid of all the credit, the tab that they've piled up for the things they've done wrong in the world to come. Right. So in some ways there can be a balance. Similarly, if a person's a rasha, and he gets a lot of good things coming his way in this world, that's in some ways a curse. That's God's way of giving him all the things he's due now, so that when the world to come comes around for this person, he's not going to have anything left, and it's not going to be a fun time for him. Something that we might be able to touch on here is the RAMBAN is saying it's true. It's not fair for the Mitzvim to be punished here, but nevertheless they are, and that had a goal. One could say that perhaps you would make it up for them in some other way. This is my speculation here. When we talk about the fact that taking away somebody's free will isn't fair because then they don't deserve punishment for the things they've done wrong, that assumes that overall the things they're going through are going to be viewed as a punishment. Right? We don't have any indication in the psukim themselves that the things that the mitzvahs are going through are not going to be made up for in some other way. So, and perhaps even a proper perspective in the world, like Meir mentioned, might actually be in some ways worth what they're going through. If you realize through all these things, if a mitzvah is going through all this suffering, but these are experiences that a person understands. Through these experiences, he starts to begin to understand how the world really works. Well, that everything he's been living until this point was a lie. Maybe in some ways it's worth it. Hard to explain.
But after all the signs and wonders and that he saw, didn't the Egyptians continue to be idolaters?
After we left.
After we left, they didn't become.
Right, we don't have any record of they became the most pristine, amazing people. I think neither were the Jews. So at the same time, we have to say that although these experiences were certainly valuable, they were certainly teaching moments.
Did they away from the idols at that point?
So to paint with a very thick brush to say everybody was no one changed at all from this whole episode, I don't know if we could say that. We don't know. We know that the Mitzvim continued to not be the best people, and if anything, perhaps the makos showed that they weren't going to change. But at the same time, who knows? Maybe some came around, and like we mentioned, the Erev Rav, those are certainly people that, at least to some level, they cause a lot of problems for us, but they may have started to go in the right direction. I think we would say they definitely deserve punishment. I think what the RAMBAN was addressing is, although they deserve punishment for sure, once we start talking about, we talk about Paro having gone over the deep end, at the point where he was so bad his bechira, his free choice, had to be taken away. There seems to be, at least the RAMBAN seems to be motivated by this. He's not sure if the Egyptian people as a whole are deserving of that severe punishment. That's viewed as like the worst possible punishment you could have, because that's essentially saying this person's going to be put at the point of no return, where he's not going to be able to change if he wants to, and that's what's being addressed. Certainly they're deserving of punishment, but to what extent does their bechira need to be taken away? If you actually look in the psukim, towards the beginning of next week's Parsha, I think before the 8th Makkah, you actually have the Egyptian people, it's in the psukim, you have them telling Paro, like, let them go already. Come on. You realize we're fighting a losing battle here.
But it's because they didn't want to suffer anymore. This was a
Right.
very selfish reason.
It's a very selfish reason, that's true. And there's also, something we need to keep in mind, and this is certainly in some ways true in Nazi Germany as well, like we learned last week, that Paro understood that the people were better than this. To make the choices of throwing Jewish babies into the river was not something that could happen overnight. And Paro, he orchestrated a whole, plan to make sure that the Jewish people, slowly but surely, were not viewed, their lives were not viewed as valuable in the Egyptian people's eyes. That concept slowly crept in their minds, like we know in Germany.
Right.
And although we certainly expect human beings, regular moral compasses that people have, to realize that once it gets to a certain point that this is like absurd, we really can't do this, and some people did back then also during the Holocaust. But at the same time, it's a challenge. It's a bigger challenge than outright telling a person, is it wrong to enslave and kill Jewish people or not? Right? When that process is one that slowly creeps up on them without them realizing, it's harder for them to see where things are going. Right? So that's why we would certainly, I think, view them as less guilty than Paro. They're certainly guilty. We're certainly, we're upset at what happened, both in Egypt and in Germany. But if we're talking about placing blame, Paro is certainly much more guilty, the person that's orchestrating this whole thing, than the Egyptians, the Mitzrayim themselves, who, to some extent, is crept upon them.
In addition to which, in that time, slaves were not uncommon. There were other slaves other than Jewish slaves. Whereas in a modern society such as Germany, which was where Jewish people were not that different. They dressed the same, rather than as in Egypt where they dressed differently, spoke the language and whatnot. That's perhaps even more hard to fathom that the people would actually.
But wasn't there some people alive at that time that knew Joseph? Didn't like the older people, the Egyptians, didn't they know Joseph?
No, knowing who Joseph was, doesn't necessarily mean that they would reflect their perception of him on his entire family.
Yeah, so they didn't say, the Jews saved us and they were good and what we're doing now to them?
That would be probably the most appropriate reaction, but they made the wrong choice. We're certainly saying they did something wrong. We're just saying, were they as guilty as Paro? No, and we can think of a number of reasons why that would be the case. Okay. There is another perspective, and it's one of those, the Sforno, Rav Sforno, he was an Italian Rishon, one of the commentators on the Torah. He's the first person to say this. It's one that totally flips everything on its head. And we've been viewing this until now as this whole episode. This is such a challenge to the concept of Bechira. We have to understand why this happened. Why is God taking away somebody's free choice? The Sforno takes it in an entirely different direction, and maybe we'll start saying things outside. So the Sforno, he talks about the fact that, like the RAMBAN mentioned, the Makos, they begin to take their toll on a person. When Paro is going through these things, it's very difficult to withstand them. And the Sforno says the reason, why a person's, why a person might be more likely to give in after going through these things is not because of thoughts of teshuvah necessarily. As we mentioned earlier, you could be motivated for the wrong reasons, like the Egyptian people were. It's not coming from I want to free the Jewish people because it's the right thing to do. It's I want to free the Jewish people because I don't want to get boils. I don't want hail to fall down on my house. And the Sforno says one of the goals of this entire process was not just so that the world could see all the miracles, so that the Jewish people can be saved, but it was also an opportunity for the Egyptians, and Paro in particular, to be able to do teshuvah. And in fact, he says, so we view hardening someone's heart as taking away their ability to do teshuvah. The Sforno says it's exactly the opposite. When a person's going through all the makos, imagine Paro, we're probably thinking this when we're reading through the Parshas, when we're going through the Haggadah. You think about all the things that happened during these makos, how severe they were, and how incredibly obvious it was that God was running the show. How on earth could you not let the Jewish people go, even after the first makkah, right? Certainly after the second. So how on earth could a person possibly choose to keep the Jewish people home? And talking about how important they were to the economy, that they were, we got so much good free slave labor out of them. At the same time, when all your water's turning to blood, when so many other horrible things are happening, it's not worth it. It's a horrible sacrifice you have to make, but you realize you got to cut your losses and let the Jewish people go because this is not working out well for you and the Egyptian people when so many horrible things are happening. So the Sforno says that is true, and that would have been the natural reaction. But a person would not have been able to do teshuvah appropriately if that was their reaction. If Paro let the Jewish people go to avoid suffering, that's not teshuvah. That's just not enjoying punishment. So the Sforno says hardening Paro's heart was actually giving Paro his bechira chafshis back, giving his free choice back to him. That Paro was unable to withstand the plagues in his natural state, and because of that, it would have been a slam dunk for him to say, okay, let the Jewish people go. Hashem didn't want that. Hashem wanted Paro to come to this on his own choice, not coming from a motivation of avoiding punishment. So being machzik as slave Paro, hardening Paro's heart, is actually giving Paro the ability to withstand the makos more, so that his choice will be coming from the right place. He never made the right choice, but until after the 10th makkah. But hardening Paro's heart is in fact the biggest proof to bechira chafshis. But it's actually Paro giving, it's a Hashem giving Paro his bechira back to be able to make a calculated, real decision that comes from his own sense of morals and not from just the harshness of the punishments. It's a really phenomenal idea by the Sforno.
Also, maybe it was confusing because didn't Pharaoh's magicians say came up with reasons why nature, why it turned, there was green, I forget, like in the mountain, the red clay or something, and it came and it turned the water red.
Oh, that I don't know about. That's actually going to be this Motzei Shabbos. Does everybody know about this, the Exodus movie that Rabbi Krabkin and the director are showing? So that's going to be getting into possible ways to explain these phenomena in a natural way. But I think more than certainly with the first day Makos, something that the Egyptian sorcerers did to Paro, they showed, look, we could do this too, and on whatever small scale they were able to do it through their sorcery, they showed Paro how it could be done. And in some ways that also was, but those were Makos where Paro hardened his own heart, so to speak, or he personally reacted to those situations and said, oh, this isn't anything special, I don't believe in this God character, this is something that you must have done, the same way my magicians made some water into blood, you guys made some water into blood. And that gave him the ability to... Right. But it came to a point after the third Makkah where they realized they couldn't replicate things anymore, and that's where Paro had to start thinking about things.
But you have a concept called Mida Keneged Mida.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to say that they weren't deserving of the punishment, you can't say that, because each Makkah was a Mida Keneged Mida.
Right, so, we certainly explore that theme. If you look at various Haggadahs, talk about how each Makkah was...
So therefore, to say that even the just a Mitzri, just an Egyptian, not part of Paro's army, that he wasn't deserving of other punishment, would go against that concept.
Right, so like we mentioned,
right?
they were worthy of punishment.
They forced themselves on the Jewish people to
do
work.
The Makos and they were Mida Keneged Mida, but what we were addressing earlier about the guilt of the Egyptian people was not to say they weren't worthy of punishment at all, but that they had been worthy of punishment to the extent that their Bechira was taken away from them. That's a really far level a very big line to cross. We're not so sure that they did. But anyway, so the Sforno's take is also very interesting. When you talk about Mida Keneged Mida, speaking to Rabbi Torchiner about this, he had suggested also of all people whose free choice is to be taken away, it's Paros. In many ways, that's the ultimate Mida Keneged Mida of all of these things. Paro throughout the story is saying, "Who's Hashem that I should know Him?" Right? I don't recognize this person. I'm the one that's in charge. I'm the one calling all the shots. And for Paro, his Mida Keneged Mida, his punishment was, you think you're in control? You have absolutely no control, even of your own personal choices. That in some way really takes it to the most, I think, poetic level that you can have. Is that he's the one person who's the exception. Of all people that we're all supposed to have Bechira Chafshis, but the one person that says, I'm in control of everything, not just my own free will, but everybody and everything that happens on this earth, he's the one who gets absolutely no choice, who has nothing that he's in charge of at all.
Yes, but later on it says that in Parshas B'Shalach, it says when he sent out the Jewish people, he took the credit for it. That's why he charged the army to chase them, because it says when he sent out the Jewish people.
I'm not following. What do you mean by that?
It was him who went and took out the Jewish people from Mitzrayim, not God. That was his idea.
Oh, right. That's this idea of. But I think in many ways we were trying to counteract that as well. Paro says, I think the Midrashim say, Paro says, Jewish people, like this is at night when Makas Bechoros is still happening, get the Jewish people out, and then it says, no, Be'etzem Hayom Hazeh, Jewish people left in the middle of the day. And they're saying, no, we're leaving when we want to. It's not about you, Paro. It's about when Hashem tells us to go, and then Hashem tells them, go in the morning.
I know that. But still, it says that on the seventh day, it says when he sent out the Jewish people, then he decided that he had a change of heart, that he shouldn't have sent them out. Right? He lost his slave labor, his everything. So it seems like a turn that everything, the punishments, seem to have not been having any effect on him.
Right. That last Yetzias Mitzrayim as well, by the way, not just the Makos. Yetzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, the miracle of the splitting of the sea. The fact that Paro chose to go there, that was also a case of hardening Paro's heart, the Pesukim tell us, where God hardened Paro's heart. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense. You see the Jewish people crossing through a big split ocean. You'd have to be a fool. I think Rashi points this out. You'd have to be a fool to chase after them in there. You're seeing them being saved right in front of your eyes, and you still somehow think you're going to get them. That itself was a big nace.
Sforno said that it looked like a natural eye.
The Kriyas Yamsuf?
Yeah, the Torah.
Interesting. Well, that theme will be developed more on Saturday night, I can imagine. Yeah. The last quote, this is a little bit of this is sort of a different approach. This is by Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. He talks about this issue at length. I'll just read what he's saying. Paro is in fact, and this is rare in Tanakh, a tragic figure. You don't have this too often. The bad guy that you almost so to speak feel bad for. He's like Lady Macbeth or like Captain Ahab in Melville's Moby Dick, trapped in an obsession which may have had rational beginnings, right or wrong, but which has taken hold of him, bringing not only him but those around him to their ruin. This is not so much a person's free will being taken away from them as a This isn't as much, God stepping in and saying, you've made bad choices so much that I'm taking away your bechira, like God actually intervening and doing that. This is kind of describing a process where a person becomes so stuck in their horrible choices that they feel so committed to it that they'll never let go of it, no matter how wrong they're being shown to be. So he continues. This is signaled simply but definitely early in next week's Ezra, talking about Parshas Bo, when Paro's own advisors say to him, Parshas Bo, let the people go so that they may worship the Lord their God. Right? The Egyptian people themselves are coming around to this. Do you not yet realize that Egypt is ruined? But Paro has left rationality behind. He can no longer hear them. The person becomes so committed to their shita, to their perspective, their way of going about things, and no matter how wrong they seem, they just keep going with it. It's a compelling narrative and helps us understand not only Paro, but Hitler, Stalin, and other tyrants in modern times. It also contains a hint, and this is really fundamental, and this really is fundamental to understanding what makes the Torah unique in religious literature, of why the Torah teaches its moral truths through narrative, rather than through philosophical or quasi-scientific discourse on the one hand, myth or parable on the other. We just had a long discussion about, philosophically why this is the case, why it's okay. It required a lot of words, right? The Sachs is saying, teach it in a story, things come up much more profoundly, and also in a way that's much more understandable, not having to get into all kinds of jargon and discussion. Compare the Torah's treatment of free will with that of the great philosophical or scientific theories. For these other systems, freedom is almost invariably an either or. Either we are always free or we never are. Some systems assert the first. Many, those who believe in social, economic, or genetic determinism, or historical inevitability, claim the second. Both are too crude to portray the inner life as it really is. The belief that freedom is an all-or-nothing phenomenon, that we have it either all the time or none of the time, blinds us to the fact that there are degrees of freedom. It can be won and lost, and its loss is gradual. Unless the will is constantly exercised, it atrophies and dies. We then become objects, not subjects, swept along by the tides of fashion, or the caprice of desire, or the passion that becomes an obsession. Only narrative can portray the subtlety of Paro's slow descent into a self-destructive madness. That, I believe, is what makes Torah truer to the human condition than its philosophical or scientific counterparts. It's a very interesting concept. So with that, he continues. That's not the end of the essay, but it's a very big theme, not only in addressing Bechira and understanding how there's degrees. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you don't, and that's a theme that we don't really have so much time to elaborate on, but if you ever read Rav Dessler, Mechtav Me'eliyahu, he discusses this concept of a Nekudas HaBechira, a shifting point of free choice, that there's certain things that are so evil that I wouldn't even conceive of doing them, and there are certain things that are so amazing, such righteous actions that I would never think of doing them either. I think that's totally beyond me. And our life is a shift from those various points. Wherever we are, I've heard Lamashal, that Rabbi Mordechai Willard calls this, Rabbi Dessler calls it the Nekudas HaBechira, the Bechira point. Rabbi Willard calls it the line of scrimmage, like in football. You have two sides battling to try to get one direction or the other, and it's really just about moving the line. It's not so much about where, the area that's behind you that's already conquered. The area that's in front of you hasn't yet been conquered. You're trying to move forward. Our life is constantly trying to refine ourselves, make the right choices, to the point where even the most lofty, amazing things that we could possibly do are actually thoughts and things that we might entertain doing. And a person that makes the wrong choices throughout their life, if they keep going down a peg, they could the most depraved, horrible things become plausible in their mind. And our job is to take our Nekudas HaBechira, our point of free will, and constantly move it up, to constantly bring it to a point where we're able to make the right choices, even better decisions and better decisions. So that's what I think Rabbi Sachs is alluding to.